Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm State Representative Dan Christensen from the 39th District, the House Republican leader. To my right is Representative Matt Manweller, who's our lead on Commerce and Labor. And this week, we're going to be taking up the Democrat education plan that's supposed to be voted on Wednesday. Of course, as we've talked about before, it's a policy-only bill, so we're also interested in finding out how soon they're going to start moving some of the taxes that they're going to need to fund this. It's going to be a big lift. We'll have some interesting dialogue, I'm sure, on the floor on Wednesday. I expect that the debate will probably go on for a little while. So if you're looking for something to watch, please be here on Wednesday for that. The other thing, too, is this last Friday was fiscal cutoff, and was policy cutoff, and this coming Friday is our fiscal cutoff. And so this week is going to be absorbed predominantly, besides the education bill over here in the House, with our fiscal committees trying to get the rest of their bills out. To my left is Senator Mark Schessler. Why don't you go ahead and say a few words, Mark?
Yeah, well, great to be with you here this week, Dan. I'm Mark Schessler, Senate Majority Leader, 9th District, Ritzville. To the left of me is Senator Dino Rossi, and also joining us is Senator Steve O'Ban today. Had a few things going on in the Senate and in the spotlight the last few days, like the I-405 situation, charter schools and the like, so I look forward to taking your questions today.
Who'd like to go first?
Of what will be on the floor in the Senate this week?
I think we are going to go back to rules with 2 pulls to the floor and build a more broad-based calendar and go about our work. Of course, we'll be limited with the time we can spend because of Ways and Means still meeting. So we'll start slow and we'll ramp up.
Do you know if Real ID will be on the floor this week?
It's a possibility. I believe we pulled it,
It is.
but we haven't had a caucus on it yet. So until we have that caucus and until Senator Nelson's caucus has their discussion on it, then we'll take a look-see.
Where is your caucus at in terms of coming to an agreement on the numbers for the plan for McCleary from the MCC?
How many what? I'm sorry. I'm
Sorry. Where is your caucus at as far as reaching an agreement with staff about what the numbers are representing how your education plan affects districts?
Well, thank you. I think we're going to be constantly working on those numbers until the bill finally passes this year. But every time we do it, we will pay for it with real budget dollars, not unicorn gold.
Senator Schessler, one of the things that the government will be talking about this afternoon, you have some experience with, I think, and that's the Affordable Care Act and how that's working. I think you've talked before of your experience as a business person and concerns about the Affordable Care Act. We're going to hear that it's working pretty well from that perspective, but from your perspective, how well is the Affordable Care Act?
Well, anybody can sign you up for free Medicaid. But if you talk to the individual market consumers, it's been a horrible ride. If you talk to small group, association members, it's been horrible. As someone who actually pays the bill for employees and their dependents, it has resulted in higher premiums, higher deductibles, and none of the things that were promised in the original bill. We're still waiting for that $2,500 decrease.
Going back to the Republican education plan, have you gotten the numbers that Senator Braun said he was going to get back, and do you have a sense of how much that impacts how much the Republican plan costs presently?
Yeah, let me take that. We are working on that. We do have numbers. The Democrats are going to be briefed here shortly, and we can do this within the budget that we have. We will be able to do this. I guess the real question is, as Representative Christensen said, is the question to be asking right now when the House pushes their bill off the floor is which taxes you're going to raise and how high you're going to raise them. And then once you've asked that question and they actually identify which taxes are going to raise and how high they're going to raise them, when are you going to vote on them? When are you actually going to pass them off the floor? Show us that you can actually pass them. That's really the next question.
Okay, but when are you going to have your numbers public? Essentially, it seems like you're
Very soon.
slamming these for the same lack of numbers in your plan.
No, I just told you we can do it within the revenues that we have. They clearly can't do their budget within their plan within the revenues they have. They have about a $7 billion tax increase that they have an obligation to let us know which taxes they're going to raise and how high they're going to raise them. And that part hasn't been clear yet.
But you don't have the property tax that's sorted out. And essentially, your side has enough, both sides have black holes when it comes to numbers.
Well, we don't have a $7 billion black hole, I can tell you that. And what like I said, is that we can do it within the revenues that we have.
Senator Russell, when you say that, are you speaking about just the 2017-19 biennium, or are you saying that you project out 4 years?
With the 4-year.
So you can do it.
We can do it within the 4-year.
Going to that.
Yes, we will be able to.
Unlike the governor's budgets or House budgets, we consider it the 4-year balanced budget law, not the 4-year balanced suggestion.
Earlier today, House Finance held a hearing on a bill to raise the smoking age from 18 to 21. I'm wondering how your two caucuses are looking at that.
Well, from the House perspective, we're split. On an issue like this, it's something that everybody's got some strong opinions one way or the other on it. But, in committee is where that debate will start. We'll see, how it moves forward, if it moves forward. And then we'll have a discussion about it in caucus. But I know over the course of the last few years, that bill has been kicking around down here, and you've got strong opinions on both sides.
Much the same in the Senate, Jim. We live next, my district, for example, and your area you cover, we have a whole bunch of border counties next to Idaho that doesn't. I don't think our tribal friends have to adhere to it. So it's really sort of porous. So because of that and other reasons, we're certainly not in lockstep.
Who else?
Can I ask about immigration enforcement? Senator O'Bannon had a comment on Friday regarding a state trooper that's under investigation for notifying ICE when a crash on the freeway happened. Where would you like the state to go as far as assisting you?
Well, I agree with President Obama, who said that if you're a criminal, you should be deported, and he made that his #1 priority in terms of civil immigration. So I don't understand why the governor has launched an administrative investigation of a trooper who, when he ran the license check, saw right away that this was a felon who'd been deported, and why that would result then in this investigation by the governor, by the state patrol, whoever initiated it. I don't think this really should be about the national issue. I think this is about good police work, keeping Washingtonians safe.
So do you think the current rules require troopers to ignore a criminal who should be deported? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm concerned about is that the governor must think that a Washington state trooper who sees a felon who's been deported several times, and there's an inquiry by federal authorities to confirm that, so he follows up on that inquiry, that should generate an administrative investigation of that trooper. I think that sends the wrong message. I think it chills other troopers who may also encounter someone with a felony record with some sort of a federal warning, and now they'll be discouraged from following up on that warning, and it may result in not getting the kind of information they need to keep themselves safe as well as the public safe.
If I may, I look at this similar, though, to somebody who's on probation. If somebody's on probation and they get pulled over, or they're in a position where they could be breaking a law under their probationary rules, what's going to happen there? Now, yes, this is a little bit different, but ultimately, at the end of the day, law enforcement is out there to enforce the law. And we would hope that they're taking the citizens' best interest in mind when they're going out there, and that they're ultimately doing that job. At the federal and state level, we got to make sure that our law enforcement officers and our rules are all being followed. And so I think that what was done was justified.
There was a bill introduced, I think today, saying that it's a bipartisan bill in the House, and it says, it calls for the state not to help the feds do anything that would interfere with the state's marijuana revenue. Essentially, in one syllable words, it says we aren't, if passed, we aren't going to let the feds mess with our marijuana revenue. Does that have a chance of getting through your
Is that on
chambers?
finance?
No, actually, I mean, I don't know if it came through finance, but I think what you're seeing, John, is a renewed bipartisan interest in the 10th Amendment. You know, for decades, when conservatives raised the issue of the 10th Amendment or states' rights, we were given the eye roll or maybe called, other names. And now you're seeing that there are reasons for these structural protections, in the Constitution, and the 10th Amendment serves a legitimate purpose. And I, for one, am glad to see that Democrats are finding a reason to support the 10th Amendment.
So do you think that the 10th Amendment applies here and that the federal government should not try to enforce federal marijuana laws in Washington State?
Well, you'd have to go back to the Gonzalez case. The Supreme Court has addressed this, and actually, believe it or not, I believe Scalia came in the majority opinion with a kind of a bipartisan or, cross-ideological majority opinion. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it looked at the tensions between the Commerce Clause and the 10th Amendment. But we're going to have these type of issues continually arise as, we have federal regulations that diverge from state policy. And this marijuana is just one of many, but I think it's healthy for us to have this conversation, because for decades the 10th Amendment was essentially ignored, and now it's becoming a vibrant area for public policy discussion.
Under those same constitutional protections, though, doesn't that restrict, doesn't it mean state agencies don't have to enforce federal laws like that on immigration? And
Well, it's not about what it doesn't have to be. You can go back to New York versus the United States, or you can go back to Prince versus the United States, and what the court has found is that state agencies cannot be commandeered into federal service. It doesn't mean that they can't, but there are rules about how the federal government can go about it. And I think that that's what Senator Band is concerned about is, what are the rules in this specific institute? But it's not a carte blanche that applies to all agencies in the same way.
Does that bill have a chance of passing in the Senate?
It's kind of hard, you introduce it after cutoff, we'd have to find out what.
It does pertain to revenue because it talks about marijuana.
Bills introduced after cutoff have a difficult path.
Who else?
Can I follow up on the ACA? The governor's going to say that there's going to be a $2 billion cost if the ACA is not replaced immediately. So it sounds like you're in favor of repeal, but are you also in favor of some sort of?
We stay in contact with Congresswoman McMorris Rogers regularly, House and Senate. We're not screaming fire in the theater yet. We believe that there will be an orderly transition, and we take her word for it. We are into scaring people for the sake of scaring them.
As you look to buy insurance company for your employees, insurance coverage for your employees next year, are you already noticing some sort of turmoil in the market because of the uncertainty over what will happen?
I haven't yet seen it this renewal of the year, but for that you might have to talk to Mrs. Schessler. She's taking care of business while I'm gone. But what we have not seen is, will we be able to get into another association? I was with Farm Bureau. Well, that didn't work under there, so we're at the Association of Washington Business. Who or where will a small business go to buy the product? We hope that they open this up across state lines. What's an association or group? We are the ones that have had the increases with less coverage. Anybody can sign up people for free Medicaid. Actually providing affordable health insurance to individuals and small business is incredibly difficult.
And in most situations, we've seen, since 2012 when ACA kicked in, we've seen, I know personally, we've seen ours double. We provide health care to our employees and their families, and that's been the reality for us, is the costs we've not seen, as Senator Schessler referred to earlier, that $2,500 we were going to get back. It's actually been absolutely the reverse. And so, as we've talked about before, while the Medicaid aspect of this and serving the 750,000 people that are recipients nearly in Washington State is a big issue to us, the cost for those who are not on it has been exorbitant. They've seen nothing but double-digit increases ever since it's kicked in. And so my hope in dealing with our folks back in Congress is that whatever they're going to do is not only going to help us take care of those folks that currently are the recipients to the tune of nearly 750,000 people in Washington State, but we're also going to see the costs reeled in with respect to those of us who are providing health care to our, our employees and their family members, because this was supposed to be a system that was going to work for everybody, and it just hasn't.
But speak to the folks who say it's really life and death for them if they're not able to continue insurance on the ACA.
Oh, yeah, and that's absolutely one of our concerns. We want to make sure that whatever's going to happen in Washington DC, just like we adapted here several years ago, I think it was 2012 or 13 when Washington State made its adaptations to deal with ACA kicking in at a national level, we will do whatever we have to at the state level to kick in.
But I think the question to be asking the governor is, how in the world do you know it's a $2 billion hole when they haven't even decided exactly what they're going to do in the first place? Why are you scaring the public? Why are you scaring the public and telling them they're not going to have health care? I was with a member of Congress this weekend, and the first thing he said is, we have to make sure a safety net is there. And before we do everything, before we move forward. And so the bottom line, that's the question to ask the governor. Well, how do you know it's $2 billion? Explain that.
Yeah, and remember now, too, that this has been not just a repeal, it's been a repeal and replace. And so, that has been what they've been talking, if I may, that's what they've been talking about back in Washington, D.C. now for many years. Now the question is going to be, since we don't serve in Congress, what are the members of Congress going to do? Are they going to live up to their word? Are they absolutely going to, in the process of repealing this, are they going to replace it? And if they do so, what with? And how is that going to affect all of us at the state levels?
Have you seen a replacement plan that you think works?
I haven't seen their plan yet, no.
Gentlemen, let me come back to education for a second. Big picture stuff. How likely is it that we're going to see an agreement this year, given the fact that both sides seem to be in their own silos at this point, Republicans and Democrats? We've got just a limited amount of time left. What are your thoughts on whether we're actually going to see a viable plan come out of the legislature?
I didn't come here planning to fail, and that hasn't changed.
Is the Senate going to take up the levy cliff before February 28th?
We've already passed the levy cliff bill. It's the House job to pass it now.
You're talking about your plan.
5607 includes levy cliff, and it's not subject to the referendum.
But there are a lot of other details in that plan that will be the subject to a lot of negotiation. Are you considering that whether this month you need to pass their standalone version of the levy cliff?
Well, I don't think we've come to the cliff yet, and clearly we're better off with a comprehensive plan than abandoned.
Okay, but the Ds probably won't agree to your levy cliff bill with a lot of other things attached to it. It's just sort of negotiating 101. Why not just do the levy cliff alone, and you guys and the two sides and then argue over everything else?
Yeah, but by doing the levy cliff thing alone, you're taking the foot off the gas pedal as far as solving the actual problem. The levy cliff bill just postpones the problem, and that's what we've been trying to avoid. I've talked to many of my school boards that I've got, and and most of them are saying, please, we get it, we've got time left. We want you guys to solve the real problem. Just doing a levy cliff bill like we've done the last couple of years doesn't solve the problem. It just kicks the can down the road. It's got a couple $1 billion attached to it. Why in the world would we do that? We want to make sure, see, it's not quite that much, but it's a lot. But why would we do that when we have an opportunity to actually fix the problem? And so getting back to your question, related to McCleary and how we're going to solve that, we came here, issues oriented with solutions. And we're working with both sides on this, as we have, and we've proven to. This group of people that's here are not strangers to coming to a good conclusion at the end of the day.
Just like if you have an emergency brake broken on a car and the regular brake's broken on a car,
Yeah, but we're still,
But John,
Yeah.
let me talk to you about that. If this was a temporary thing, maybe, but if you look at the Democratic House plan, they maintain a 24% levy capacity going forward in perpetuity. And that defeats the entire purpose of the McCleary litigation and our legislation to fix it, right? What got us into this trouble in the first place is that local school districts were moving levy money into basic education. The court said, you have to fix that problem first and foremost. And if you look at the Dem plan, they maintain 24% levy capacity despite the different tax base, which means that the rich schools will get richer and the poor schools will get poorer, and it absolutely guarantees that we will be back in court a year after we finish up McCleary 1. So I am baffled that after 10 years of talking about McCleary, that the House Democrats would propose a solution that guarantees that we will not solve McCleary and be back in court. You cannot have 24% levy authority and still meet the dictates of the McCleary decision.
When was the last time you you have school districts that are saying that they need a certain date, you know, February 28th, and yet you're saying that that's only satisfied if Democrats just capitulate and agree, like, your plan unchallenged, and, I mean, that's never happened before.
Well,
So why even
yeah.
act like that's a
I would say
possibility?
this, though, in response to that, is the Senate, within the first few weeks of session, put out their plan with 25 votes. Yes, there are some holes in it, okay? We get that. You talked about those. The House Democrats have not. We're supposed to do that on Wednesday, but there's a big difference. It's a policy-only bill. They've got over $9 billion in tax increases that are currently sitting in the Finance Committee, and not one of those votes have been taken yet. I'm anxious for them to see how they're going to fund it, because you talk about maybe a several $100 million to a couple $1 billion hole currently that we will get worked out with respect to what the Senate has moved forward with, but there's no funding. I mean, they've got billions. It's a $7 billion hole. That's a massive hole. I mean, the hole's bigger than the ship. And so at some point, when are we going to get serious about, let's put out a plan in the House that is not just a policy-only bill, but it actually has the money to fund it. If it's to one partisan extreme versus what the Senate Republican majority extreme is, fine, but let's get 50 votes over here funded to the 25 that have been put out in the Senate, and then we start negotiating. When they put this plan out 3 weeks into session, it gave us plenty of time. The whole idea was fund education first, right? We've never gotten the whole budget out by February, but why can't we get the education portion of that budget out by February? Absolutely. That's why I ran that bill back in 2006 that was titled Fund Education First, and it was making it the priority.
School districts in your district, and they're all give you thumbs up for how you guys.
Mine are fine. Mine are fine.
I've had very good response from many districts. I've communicated with regional conference calls with school directors. I've had dozens and dozens of directors, administrators in my office. Pretty happy about the plan. They like it, so stay the course.
So they're not concerned about the way the plan might shortchange free and reduced lunch students and drop that amount of money for the individual schools?
Well, that's the first argument I've heard about free and reduced lunches, Jim.
Your plan changes the way that the funding is.
Right, but the total dollars, OFM came out and said every district in the state is ahead under our plan.
Yeah,
That's
but
not
they
our,
said, wait, we gotta look at those numbers.
well,
So-
but that's the actual money increase, they're there. We have simple, easy to understand path under the per pupil model and the enhancements. Now, is it perfected yet? No. Perfect? No. But it is paid for by our budget team. We've had this concern about extended contracts since the very first special session I went through here 25 years ago. There was great consternation. It's not the first time, and I guarantee you, this legislature will increase education funding in the end. So the need to riff really isn't there. I can't believe my colleagues in the House, Republican or Democrat, would ever vote for a budget without an education increase.
Representative Christensen or Manuel, can you give us an idea of some of the amendments your caucus is going to offer on Wednesday, and do you know already if they're going to accept any?
Well, I mean, the most important amendment I'm going to offer is exactly what I just talked about, that says if you're going to allow to have two pots of money, basic ed money from the state and enrichment money from local levies, you have to account for that money, you have to keep it in separate spots, you have to audit that money, and there will be consequences if you take local levy money from enrichment and you put it into basic education, because if you do that, then you will be covering McCleary litigation till the end of your career. That is the absolute most important reform that we get out of these negotiations, is to make sure that this problem just does not reoccur. So that's a big one. I don't know what they'll accept, I hope they do. If they don't accept it Wednesday, I hope they will eventually accept it, or they should accept the fact that we're going to be doing this for year after year. We're going to look at some class size requirements. We want to make sure that class sizes are kept small, that if we allocate money for smaller class sizes, then that money has to be spent on smaller class sizes and cannot be, redistributed once it gets down to the local school districts. We're going to look at some of that levy capacity. We think that 24% is too high, and it will lead to inequities across the state, so we'd like to see that changed, and I think Representative Stokesbury is going to introduce some ideas along those lines. So here's the three things that we're concerned about. The McCleary solution that the House Democrats have put forward doesn't have any funding for their solutions. It does not solve the litigation of McCleary, and it does not put any parameters around the uses of levy money, and it does not actually reform education in any way. I'll remind you, their education bill did not go to the Education Committee. It went right to appropriations. What does that tell you about what it did to education if it doesn't even have to go to the Education Committee, right?
Sounds like what the Senate plan did.
I don't know what happened in the Senate. I'll let Senator Sushla, but I'm saying, reform education, put walls around levy money, and make sure that we don't get additional litigation.
That is what happened in the Senate, to be correct.
You are correct, but I believe that all of our education members also serve on Ways and Means.
Most all.
Most all, maybe one.
Our
doesn't.
chair does
There's
not.
one that isn't.
Santos does not serve on the Appropriations Committee.
You know, one thing I've heard a lot about from constituents is this tripling in car taps with the ST3 mandates. That's what's kind of blowing up my email and letterbox. And I think that just suggests to us that we have got to figure out ways, I think, to make that regional transit authority more accountable to those that need it to be a credible, transparent body that is more interested in delivering the transit needs we need affordably on time, which frankly some of us just don't have the confidence that they will, and I don't think voters have the confidence that they will do so, particularly after receiving these triple excise tax
Senator Van, do you think,
amounts.
given the reaction that you and other lawmakers in King and Snohomish County are getting, do you think that the Sound Transit 3 is going to torpedo your plan if it gets on the ballot by referendum? They'll be so upset that they won't support education and a new property tax because they won't.
I think that's a concern. I think the governor with his $8.7 billion tax increase should be even more concerned that.
You're not putting that one on the ballot.
No, I'm sure not doing that, but he should be concerned that Sound Transit and is sort of laying the groundwork for even a stronger anti-tax sentiment within the state.
Do you have any specific proposals you're thinking about, or to increase the accountability for Sound Transit, or specific areas where you?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because yes, I do. Senate Bill 5001 is, I think, an important step in holding that board accountable. Right now, as you all know, the board is appointed by the 3 county executives, and 1 county executive appoints a majority of those on the board. That is antithetical to, I think, to our basic democratic principles of representative government. I think if we're going to try to reinstill the confidence of the voters in this region, in that body that is going to be spending $54 billion, going to be taxing my constituents in the way that it is, they have to be directly elected by the people. That's the only way that body is going to have the credibility that it's going to need to manage this program without deep concerns among the electorate.
Senator Rossi, you talked a little bit about it. Could we segue a little bit over to 405?
Sure.
You've actually had a hearing on your bill in the Senate Transportation Committee. What's the progress now on that bill, and what do you look for at the end of the session?
Well, I hope to have it exec out, and the idea is obviously to remove the tolls on 405 and also take it back from 3 people to 2 people. I live in Sammamish, have an office in Everett. I go the opposite direction. I never hit the brakes, but I watch these poor people on the other side paying $10 to drive in that lane if they're a little bit late for work. And so that's why I sponsored the bill and co-sponsored this bipartisan sponsorship with Senator Colombo. And we feel that's a real problem, having 2 lanes that are dedicated as well. And that 1 lane that actually the public paid for with the gas tax. And so it's unconscionable. What the state's doing is what they're doing is actually, they're taking our most valuable commodity, which is our time. They're taking our time from us by making it congestion so bad and selling it to somebody else. That's what the state is doing to gain revenue. Now back to the Sound Transit piece, I also sponsored a bill to let local jurisdictions to vote whether they, from the city councils and also as a petition within a city to get out of Sound Transit. I live in Sammamish. We get the bill. I'm probably going to get a Parker ride when I'm in the nursing home. That's about it. And so, and I know Senator O'Ban has some similar issues where you get very little, but you get the bill. And our constituents are now starting to call us, what's this bill? We didn't see that in the election. We didn't see that. When it's such the political clutter during a presidential race, it's hard to pay attention to those sorts of things. You didn't know that your average car is going to be paying about $300 extra in tab costs. And so that's what we're hearing from constituents right now, at least in where I'm from and where you're from.
The voters in Pierce County paid attention. We voted it down by
They
a
voted
large
it down.
margin.
That's right. Okay.